The year was 1885, and the Arizona desert was still wild and dangerous. In a small town called Cedar Ridge, smoke rose from a blacksmith shop every morning as the sun painted the mountains orange. The man working the forge was different from most folks in town. His name was Joseph Smith, but the Apache people called him Running Bear. Joseph was not fully Apache, and he was not fully Mexican either. His mother had been Apache, his father Mexican. This made him something of an outsider wherever he went. But there was one thing nobody could argue with. The man could work metal, like magic. When farmers needed their plows fixed or the sheriff needed new horseshoes, they all came to Joseph's shop. His hands were strong and steady from years of hammering iron. His dark hair was always tied back to keep it away from the sparks. Joseph had built his shop right between the Apache reservation and the growing white settlement. It was like he was trying to bridge two worlds that did not want to touch each other. Most days, Joseph worked alone except for his grandmother, who lived in the small house behind the shop. She was full-blooded Apache, nearly 70 years old, with silver hair braided down her back. The townspeople called her Old Maria, though that was not her real Apache name. She kept to herself mostly, tending a small garden and making beautiful beadwork that Joseph sometimes traded in town. Joseph had grown up caught between two worlds. The Apache children sometimes teased him for his mixed blood. The Mexican children did the same. And the white children? Well, they usually stayed away altogether. This taught him early that being different meant being alone most of the time. But Joseph had found peace in his work. There was something honest about shaping metal, with fire and hammer. The iron did not care what color his skin was or which blood ran stronger in his veins. When he worked, the world made sense. On this particular morning in late September, Joseph was fixing a broken wheel rim for the general store when he heard horses approaching fast. Dust clouds rose in the distance, and he could tell by the way they rode that something was very wrong. 3 cavalry soldiers pulled up to his shop, their horses breathing hard and covered in sweat. The leader was Lieutenant Hayes, a young man with serious eyes who had always been fair in his dealings with Joseph. "Smith," Hayes called out, swinging down from his saddle. "We need all the help we can get. There's been an attack." Joseph set down his hammer and wiped his hands on his leather apron. "What kind of attack?" "Apache war party hit the Morrison homestead last night. Burned everything. Killed." Hayes paused, looking uncomfortable. "Killed the whole family, we think." Joseph felt his stomach drop. He knew the Morrisons. They were decent people who had never caused trouble for anyone. The father, William, had even brought his plow to Joseph for repairs just last month. They had talked about the weather and the crops like neighbors do. "Are you sure they are all gone?" Joseph asked quietly. Lieutenant Hayes shook his head. "That is what we need to find out. We are putting together search parties. Some folks in town think you might know these hills well enough to help us look for survivors." Joseph glanced back at his grandmother, who had come out of the house when she heard the horses. She looked worried. They both knew what this meant. When Apache attacked white settlers, it made things bad for all Apache people, even peaceful ones. "I will help," Joseph said. "Give me a moment to get my things." His grandmother walked over to him as he gathered supplies. She spoke quietly in Apache. "This will bring trouble, grandson. When blood is spilled, people look for someone to blame." "No, grandmother, but if there are survivors, especially children, they need help now." She nodded slowly. "Then go. But be careful. Fear makes people do foolish things." Joseph mounted his horse and rode out with the soldiers. The Morrison homestead was about 8 miles northeast in a valley that had seemed perfect for farming. Good water, rich soil, protected from the worst winds. When they arrived, Joseph's heart sank. The house was nothing but blackened timber and ash. The barn had burned too. Scattered around the yard were signs of violence that made Joseph look away. This had not been a quick raid for supplies. This had been something much worse. Lieutenant Hayes organized the men into groups to search the area. Joseph rode with 2 other men toward the hills where frightened people might try to hide. He knew these rocks and canyons better than most. If anyone had escaped, They would head for the high ground. They searched all day as the sun beat down on them. Joseph found tracks that might have been human, but they led to dead ends or disappeared on hard rock. As evening approached, he was starting to think they were too late. Then, just as they were about to give up for the day, Joseph heard something. It was very faint, but it sounded like crying. He held up his hand to stop the other men and listened carefully. There it was again, coming from a small cave hidden behind some fallen rocks. "Hello?" Joseph called softly. "Do not be afraid. We are here to help." The crying stopped immediately. Joseph dismounted and approached the cave slowly, his hands visible and empty. "My name is Joseph. I am here with soldiers from town. Are you hurt?" A small, scared voice answered from the darkness. "Are you going to hurt us?" "No," Joseph said gently. "We came to find you and take you somewhere safe." Slowly, 3 small figures emerged from the cave, 2 boys and a girl, all under 10 years old. They were dirty, scratched, and clearly terrified. The girl, who seemed to be the oldest, held the hand of the smallest boy protectively. Joseph's heart broke seeing them. These were the Morrison children. He had seen them in town with their parents, clean and happy. Now they looked like wild animals, scared of every shadow. "Are you the Morrison children?" he asked softly. The girl nodded but did not speak. "What are your names?" "I am Lucy," she whispered. "This is my brother Ben, and this is baby Charlie." Lucy looked to be about 8, Ben maybe 6, and little Charlie could not have been more than 4 years old. They were all thin and shaking, but they were alive. Joseph felt tears in his eyes, but he kept his voice steady. "Well, Lucy, Ben and Charlie, you are very brave. You did exactly the right thing hiding here. Now we are going to take you back to town where you will be safe and get some food." The children stayed close together as Lieutenant Hayes and the other men helped get them mounted on horses. Joseph rode with little Charlie in front of him, feeling the boy's tiny body trembling. As they rode back toward town, Joseph wondered what would happen to these children now. Their parents were gone. Their home was destroyed. They had no family that he knew of in the territory, but he also worried about something else. The attack on the Morrison family would make the white people angry and suspicious of all Apache. It did not matter that most Apache had nothing to do with the violence. When people were scared and hurt, they often struck out at whoever was closest. Joseph looked down at little Charlie, who had fallen asleep against his chest despite everything that had happened. The boy's face was peaceful now, trusting that the adults would keep him safe. As they approached town, Joseph could see people gathering in the streets. Word had already spread about the Morrison family. There would be talk of revenge. There would be demands for the army to take action against the Apache reservation. And Joseph, caught between 2 worlds as always, would have to navigate the storm that was coming. He just hoped he could keep his grandmother safe, keep his business running, and somehow help these 3 orphaned children find a new life. The forge would have to wait until tomorrow. Tonight, there were more important things to worry about than fixing broken metal. Sometimes, Joseph thought as they rode into town, broken hearts were much harder to repair. The next morning, Joseph woke up thinking about the 3 Morrison children. He had barely slept, wondering what would become of them. In a frontier town like Cedar Ridge, there were not many options for orphaned children. He walked to his forge and started the fire, but his mind was not on his work. As he heated the coals, he heard voices from the main street. People were gathering outside the general store, and their voices sounded angry. Joseph left his shop and walked toward the crowd. He could see the 3 children sitting on the store's front porch, wrapped in blankets and eating bread. They looked lost and confused, staying close together like scared puppies. Mayor Thompson was talking to a group of men. Joseph caught pieces of their conversation as he approached. "Cannot keep them here indefinitely," the mayor was saying. "The territorial orphanage in Tucson is full, and they say they cannot take any more children right now." "What about families? Here in town?" someone asked. "The Hendersons might take 1 child, but not 3. The Williamses are too old. The Johnsons already have 6 children of their own." Joseph listened as the men discussed the children's fate like they were talking about stray cattle. Nobody seemed to know what to do. The children just sat there, listening to strangers decide their future. Old Pete Martinez, who ran the general store, spoke up. "Those children have been through enough. They should not be separated from each other. They are all the family each one has left." "That is a nice thought, Pete," Mayor Thompson replied. "But we have to be practical. 3 children are a lot for any family to take on." Joseph found himself stepping forward before he had really decided to speak. "I could take them." The conversation stopped. Every man turned to look at him. The silence stretched long enough to make Joseph wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. "You?" Mayor Thompson said finally. "Joseph, you are not even married. You live with your old Apache grandmother. That is no place for white children." Joseph felt his face heat up, but he kept his voice calm. "I have a good house. I make enough money to feed and clothe 3 children, and they would not have to be separated." "Now hold on," said Frank Stevens, whose ranch bordered the reservation. "These children have been through a terrible shock. The last thing they need is to be raised by—" He paused, clearly trying to find words that would not sound too harsh. "Well, by people who are not their own kind." Joseph looked at the children. Little Charlie was crying quietly, and his sister Lucy was trying to comfort him. Ben just stared at the ground, his face blank with shock. "Their own kind is dead," Joseph said quietly. "Right now, they need someone who will care about them and keep them together. That matters more than the color of anyone's skin." Lieutenant Hayes, who had been listening from the edge of the group, stepped forward. "I have seen how Smith handled those children yesterday. He was gentle with them, they trusted him." "That may be true," Mayor Thompson said, "but there are practical considerations. What happens when these children grow up? They will need to fit into white society, find white spouses, raise white families. How will living with Apache prepare them for that?" Joseph wanted to argue, but he knew the mayor was speaking what most people believed. In 1885, Arizona, the worlds of white and Apache were supposed to stay separate. Children like Lucy, Ben, and Charlie were expected to grow up in their own communities, marry their own kind, and never cross those invisible lines. But Joseph also knew what it felt like to be caught between worlds. Maybe these children would face some of the same challenges he had, but at least they would face them together as a family. "Give me a month," Joseph said. "Let me take care of them for 1 month while you look for a better solution. They need a place to stay right now, and I can provide that." The men looked at each other uncertainly. Finally, Mayor Thompson sighed. "I suppose we do not have many other choices at the moment, but this is temporary, Smith. Just until we can find proper families for these children." Joseph nodded. "I understand." He walked over to the children and knelt down so he was at their eye level. "Lucy, Ben, Charlie, would you like to come stay at my house for a while? I have a nice place with good food and warm beds." Lucy looked at him suspiciously. "Are you the Apache man?" "I am part Apache, yes, but I am also part Mexican, and mostly, I am just a man who wants to help you." "Will you hurt us?" little Charlie asked, his voice barely a whisper. "No," Joseph said firmly. "I will never hurt you. My job is to keep you safe and help you feel better." Ben spoke for the first time since they had found him. "Can we stay together?" "Yes. All 3 of you will stay together. I promise." Joseph helped the children gather the few things the townspeople had given them and walked them back to his house. His grandmother was waiting on the porch, and Joseph could tell she was not entirely happy about this decision. She looked at the 3 pale, scared children and sighed deeply. Then she knelt down and spoke to them in English, though her accent was thick. "I am Maria. You will be safe here." That first day was difficult. The children barely spoke and would not eat much. They jumped at every sudden sound. When Joseph started up his forge that afternoon, the sound of hammering on metal made all 3 children run and hide. Joseph realized they were probably remembering the attack on their family. Any loud noise brought back those terrible memories. His grandmother proved to be wiser than he was. She understood trauma in ways that Joseph did not. She spoke to the children softly, gave them simple tasks to keep their hands busy, and never pushed them to talk about what had happened. "Healing takes time," she told Joseph that evening as they watched the children sleep. "Their spirits are wounded. We must be patient." Over the next few days, small changes began to happen. Charlie started following Joseph around the shop, staying far enough away from the forge to feel safe but close enough to watch what Joseph was doing. Lucy helped his grandmother in the kitchen and garden. Ben spent hours sitting quietly, but at least he was sitting in the same room with them instead of hiding. Joseph learned to work more quietly. He saved his heavy hammering for times when the children were outside or busy with other things. He started teaching them simple things about metalwork that did not require loud noises: how to sort different kinds of metal, how to keep tools clean and organized. His grandmother taught them practical skills too: how to tend a garden, how to preserve food, how to make simple repairs around the house. But more importantly, she taught them that they were not alone. "Family is not just blood," she told them one evening as they all sat around the dinner table. "Family is people who care for each other, who stay together through good times and bad times." Lucy looked at her with serious 8-year-old eyes. "Are we your family now?" Joseph's grandmother smiled, and Joseph saw tears in her eyes. "If you want to be." By the end of the first week, something had shifted. The children still had nightmares. They still got scared of loud noises, but they had stopped flinching every time Joseph or his grandmother moved too quickly. They were starting to trust. Joseph knew this was only the beginning. The townspeople expected him to give up the children as soon as other arrangements could be made, and he was not sure that keeping them was even the right thing to do. They deserved a chance at a normal life, with people who shared their background and could teach them to fit into white society. But every evening, as he watched Lucy help with dinner while Ben played quietly with little Charlie, Joseph felt something he had never experienced before. For the first time in his life, he was not alone. For the first time, he had a real family. The question was, how long would he be allowed to keep it? 6 months passed like seasons changing in the desert. Winter came and went, and spring brought new growth to the small garden behind Joseph's house. But the biggest changes were not in the plants. They were in the 3 children who now called his house home. Lucy had grown taller and stronger. Her blonde hair, which had been tangled and dirty when they first found her, now hung in neat braids that Joseph's grandmother had taught her to make. She had become the little mother of the group, always making sure her brothers were fed and clean. Ben had started to smile again. It was rare, but when it happened, it lit up his whole face. He had discovered that he loved working with his hands, just like Joseph. The boy could spend hours arranging pieces of metal by size and type, or carefully cleaning tools until they shined. Little Charlie, now 5 years old, had changed the most. The scared, silent child who used to hide behind his sister was now full of energy and questions. He followed Joseph everywhere, chattering about everything he saw. "Uncle Joe," Charlie said one morning as Joseph prepared to start work. The children had started calling him Uncle Joe, and it made his heart warm every time. "Why does the fire turn the metal red?" "Heat changes things, Charlie. Makes them soft so we can shape them into what we need. Like how grandmother's stories change my bad dreams into good ones." Joseph smiled. His grandmother had been telling the children Apache stories at bedtime, tales of brave warriors and wise animals. The children loved these stories, and they seemed to help with the nightmares that still visited sometimes. Something like that, yes. The children had learned many Apache words and customs. They could count to 20 in Apache. They knew which plants in the desert were good for medicine and which ones to avoid. Joseph's grandmother had taught Lucy how to make traditional corn cakes, and the girl had become quite good at it. But they had not forgotten their own heritage either. Joseph made sure they remembered their parents and the life they had before. They said Christian prayers at bedtime along with Apache blessings. They celebrated both Christmas and Apache harvest ceremonies. It was a strange mix, but it worked for their little family. They were creating something new, something that belonged to all of them. One warm April morning, Joseph was teaching Ben how to use a small hammer to shape a piece of copper when Lucy came running from town. She had been at the general store getting supplies, something she did regularly now that she was older and more confident. "Uncle Joe," she called, out of breath from running. "There are new people in town, a man and woman from back east. They are asking about us." Joseph set down his hammer and wiped his hands. "What kind of questions?" Mrs. Martinez heard them talking to Mayor Thompson. "They want to know about the Morrison children. They asked if we were still living here with you." Joseph felt a cold worry settle in his stomach. He had known this day might come. For 6 months the townspeople had left them alone. The children were healthy and happy. Joseph's business was doing well and there had been no trouble. But he had always known that someone might eventually come looking for the children. That evening, Mayor Thompson came to visit. Joseph invited him in for coffee, and they sat at the kitchen table while the children played outside with his grandmother. "Joseph," the mayor began, "we need to talk about the Morrison children." "What about them?" "That couple Lucy saw today. They are relatives of the Morrison family, William Morrison's brother and his wife from Pennsylvania. They came west as soon as they got word about what happened." Joseph nodded slowly. He had wondered if the Morrisons had any family back east. "They want to take the children back with them," Mayor Thompson continued. "Give them a proper home, proper schooling, a proper upbringing." "The children have a proper home here," Joseph said quietly. "Now, Joseph, you know what I mean. These people can give the children things you cannot. Good schools, connections to the right kind of people, a chance to marry well and fit into society." Through the window, Joseph could see Lucy teaching Charlie how to braid grass into a small basket, the way his grandmother had taught her. Ben was showing both children how to stack stones to make a wall, concentrating seriously on getting each stone perfectly balanced. "They are happy here," Joseph said. "I know you have grown attached to them, and I am sure they care about you too, but you have to think about what is best for their futures." Mayor Thompson leaned forward. "These people are educated, well off. They can send the children to real schools, maybe even college someday. They can give them opportunities that a frontier blacksmith just cannot provide." Joseph knew the mayor was probably right about the practical things. He could teach the children to read and write, but not as well as real teachers could. He could provide food and shelter, but not fancy clothes or fine manners. "When do they want to meet the children?" Joseph asked. "Tomorrow morning. They are staying at the hotel tonight." That evening, Joseph sat the children down and explained about their uncle and aunt. He watched their faces change as he told them that these relatives wanted to take them to a new home far away. Lucy was the first to speak. "Do we have to go?" "I do not know yet," Joseph answered honestly. "They are your family by blood. That gives them certain rights." "But you are our family too," Ben said. "And grandmother. We are all family now." Little Charlie climbed onto Joseph's lap. "I do not want to go away. I want to stay with you and grandmother and help in the shop." Joseph felt his heart breaking. These children had become everything to him. The thought of losing them was almost unbearable, but he also knew he might not have a choice. His grandmother, who had been listening quietly, spoke in Apache to Joseph. Then she turned to the children. "Sometimes in life we must make very hard choices. But remember, love does not disappear just because people are far apart. The love we have shared will always be with you, no matter where you go." The next morning, Mr. and Mrs. Morrison arrived at Joseph's house. They were well-dressed, educated people who spoke with cultured Eastern accents. Mrs. Morrison was a thin woman with kind eyes but a stern mouth. Mr. Morrison was tall and serious with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Joseph introduced them to the children, who stayed close together and spoke very little. The visitors asked questions about school, about what the children liked to do, about their memories of their parents. Mrs. Morrison seemed surprised by how healthy and well-behaved the children were. "They seem to have been well cared for," she told Joseph quietly. "They are good children," Joseph replied. "Smart and kind and brave." Mr. Morrison watched Ben demonstrate how he helped Joseph organize tools. The boy has good attention to detail. He would do well in school back east. They watched Lucy help Joseph's grandmother prepare lunch and saw how naturally she cared for little Charlie. They listened to Charlie chatter about everything he had learned, mixing English with Apache words. After spending the morning with the children, the Morrisons asked to speak with Joseph privately. "Mr. Smith," Mrs. Morrison began, "I will be honest with you. We came here expecting to find 3 traumatized children living in rough conditions. Instead, we find healthy, happy children who clearly love their caregivers. However," Mr. Morrison added, "we still believe they would be better served living with their own people, receiving proper education, learning to take their place in civilized society." "But we are not unreasonable people," Mrs. Morrison continued. "We can see that forcing the children to leave immediately would be cruel to them and unfair to you." Joseph waited, not sure where this was heading. "We propose a compromise, Mr. Morrison said. "Let us take the children back east for a year. Give them a chance to experience life there, to attend good schools, to meet their extended family. After a year, if they are truly unhappy, they can choose to return here." It was not the answer Joseph had hoped for, but it was better than losing them forever immediately. That evening, Joseph explained the proposal to the children. They were not happy about leaving, but they understood that they did not have much choice in the matter. "Will you wait for us?" Lucy asked. "If we want to come back after a year, will you still want us?" Joseph knelt down and pulled all 3 children close. "I will always want you. You will always have a home here for as long as I live." His grandmother nodded. "We will count the days until you return." As they prepared for bed that night, Joseph realized that the next few weeks would be their last together, at least for a long time. He was determined to make every day count, to give the children as many good memories as possible to take with them. But deep in his heart, he feared that once they experienced the opportunities and comforts of life back east, they might never want to return to the simple desert life they had built together. Sometimes, Joseph thought as he watched them sleep, loving someone means letting them go, even when it breaks your heart. 2 weeks before the children were supposed to leave for Pennsylvania, everything changed. Joseph woke up to the sound of angry voices outside his house. It was barely dawn, but a crowd had gathered in front of his forge. He dressed quickly and stepped outside to find about 20 men from town standing in his yard. Some he recognized as customers who had always been polite to him. Others were faces he knew but had never spoken to. A few were strangers, probably from ranches outside town. At the front of the group stood Judge Crawford, a man who had arrived in Cedar Ridge just 2 months earlier. He was tall and thin with sharp features and cold gray eyes. Joseph had heard that the judge came from back east and had strong opinions about how the territory should be run. "Smith," Judge Crawford called out in a voice that carried across the yard. "We need to talk." Joseph walked forward slowly, keeping his hands visible and his voice calm. "What can I do for you, Judge? You can explain why you thought it was appropriate to raise white children in an Apache household." The directness of the accusation hit Joseph like a physical blow. He had expected this conversation eventually, but not with 20 men backing up the judge. "Those children needed a home," Joseph said simply. "I provided one." "You provided something," the judge replied, "but whether it qualifies as a proper home is debatable." One of the ranchers, a man named Pete Wilson, stepped forward. "My wife was at the store yesterday when those Morrison children came in with your Indian grandmother. She said they were chattering in Apache like little savages. That is no way for white children to behave." Joseph felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his voice level. "Learning another language never hurt anyone. The children also speak English perfectly well." "That is not the point," Judge Crawford interrupted. "The point is that these children are being corrupted by inappropriate influences. They are learning heathen customs, heathen beliefs, heathen ways of thinking. They are learning to be kind, hard-working, and honest," Joseph replied. "If those are heathen qualities, then maybe the world needs more heathens." The crowd stirred at this response. Some men nodded agreement, but others looked angry at what they saw as disrespect. Judge Crawford raised his hand for silence. "Mr. Smith, I have been appointed by the territorial government to ensure the proper welfare of all citizens, including orphaned children. I have observed the Morrison children, and while I admit they appear healthy, I am concerned about their moral and cultural development. Joseph noticed that Mr. and Mrs. Morrison had joined the crowd. They stood at the back, looking uncomfortable but not speaking up. "What exactly are you saying, Judge?" Joseph asked. "I am saying that white children should be raised by white families with white values, in white communities. It is not natural or healthy for them to be raised by people of a different race, no matter how well-intentioned those people might be." Old Pete Martinez pushed through the crowd. "Now hold on, Judge. Joseph has done right by those children. Anyone with eyes can see that." "No one is questioning Mr. Smith's intentions," the judge replied smoothly. "But good intentions are not enough when it comes to shaping young minds." At that moment, the children appeared on the porch. Lucy, Ben, and Charlie stood close together, clearly frightened by the crowd of angry men in their yard. Joseph's grandmother stood behind them, one protective hand on each of the boys' shoulders. Judge Crawford looked at the children and his expression softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. "Children, you should go inside. The adults need to finish talking." Lucy stepped forward instead of retreating. "Are you here to take us away from Uncle Joe?" The directness of her question caught everyone off guard. Judge Crawford seemed unprepared to deal with a child who spoke so boldly. "We are here to make sure you have the best possible future," he said finally. "We have a good future here," Ben said, quietly but clearly. Little Charlie ran down from the porch and grabbed Joseph's hand. "These men are scaring me. Make them go away." Joseph knelt down and gathered all three children close to him. Looking up at the crowd, he said, "You are frightening children who have already been through terrible trauma. Whatever you need to discuss with me, we can do it without 20 men standing in their yard." Judge Crawford looked around at the other men. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation at the courthouse." "There is nothing to continue," Joseph said, standing up. "These children are well cared for, healthy, and happy. Their relatives from Pennsylvania will be taking them east in 2 weeks. I do not see what more there is to discuss." "Actually, there is quite a bit more," the judge replied. "I have been in contact with the territorial authorities about this situation. There are questions about whether you are a suitable guardian for white children, even temporarily." Frank Stevens, the rancher whose land bordered the reservation, spoke up. "Judge, we all know Joseph. He is not like the wild Apache. He runs an honest business, keeps to himself, causes no trouble." "Mr. Stevens, I appreciate that sentiment, but the issue is not Mr. Smith's character. The issue is whether racial mixing is in the best interests of these children." Joseph felt his grandmother's hand on his shoulder. She spoke quietly in Apache, reminding him to stay calm. Then she stepped forward and addressed the crowd in her heavily accented English. "I am old woman. I have seen much in my years. I have seen white children and Apache children and Mexican children. All children need same things: love, food, safety, someone to teach them right from wrong. Color of skin does not change this." Her simple words seemed to have more impact than all the judge's formal language. Several men in the crowd looked uncomfortable, but Judge Crawford was not swayed. "Ma'am, I respect your years, but this is a matter of law and policy, not emotion." He turned back to Joseph. "Mr. Smith, I am ordering you to surrender custody of these children immediately. They will be placed in temporary care until proper arrangements can be made." "What kind of temporary care?" Joseph asked. "There is a missionary family in town willing to take them in until they can travel east." Joseph looked at Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, who had been silent throughout this confrontation. "Do you support this decision?" Mr. Morrison looked uncomfortable. "We simply want what is best for the children." "And you think what is best is to uproot them from the only stable home they have known in almost a year? To separate them from people they love with just 2 weeks' notice?" Mrs. Morrison spoke up for the first time. "Mr. Smith, we have seen how much the children care for you and your grandmother, but surely you can understand that they need to be prepared for life in white society." Joseph looked down at the 3 children, who were clinging to him with frightened eyes. Lucy was trying hard not to cry. Ben looked angry. Charlie just looked confused. And if I refuse to give them up? Joseph asked. Judge Crawford's expression hardened. Then I will have the sheriff remove them by force, and I will also have to consider whether your refusal to cooperate with legal authority makes you unfit to live in this community at all. The threat was clear. Joseph could lose not just the children but his home and business as well. Lieutenant Hayes, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. Judge, I have seen how Mr. Smith cares for these children. I was there when we found them. I saw how they trusted him from the first moment. Lieutenant, I appreciate your input, but this is a civil matter, not a military one. Joseph realized he was trapped. If he fought the judge's order, he would likely lose everything, and the children would be traumatized by being forcibly removed. If he cooperated, at least the transition might be gentler. His grandmother seemed to read his thoughts. She squeezed his shoulder and nodded slightly. Very well, Joseph said quietly. When do you want them? This afternoon. The missionary family is prepared to receive them immediately. Joseph felt like his heart was being torn from his chest, but he kept his voice steady. May I have a few hours to help them pack their things and say goodbye? Judge Crawford nodded. Of course. But understand, Mr. Smith, this decision is final. These children will not be returned to your care. As the crowd dispersed, Joseph knelt down with the children again. Lucy was crying now, and Ben was holding Charlie tight. I do not understand, Lucy said. Why do they hate us for being here? They do not hate you, Joseph said gently. They think they are protecting you. They believe you will have a better life with people who look like you. But we do not want a different life, Ben said. We want this life, with you and grandmother. Joseph pulled them all close, breathing, in the scent of their hair, trying to memorize everything about this moment. Sometimes, he said, his voice thick with emotion, we do not get to choose what happens to us, but we can choose how we face it, and we can choose to keep loving each other no matter how far apart we are. As they walked back to the house to pack the children's few belongings, Joseph realized that the simple life they had built together was ending. The two worlds he had tried to bridge, Apache and white, traditional and modern, were pulling apart, and his little family was being torn apart with them. But he also realized something else. The love they had shared was real. The bonds they had formed were strong. And no judge, no crowd of angry men, no distance could ever take that away completely. The question now was whether love would be enough to help them all survive what was coming next. That afternoon felt like the longest day of Joseph's life. He helped Lucy, Ben, and Charlie pack their few belongings into a small wooden trunk that had belonged to his grandmother. Each item they folded and placed inside felt like another piece of his heart being torn away. Lucy carefully wrapped the small beaded bracelet his grandmother had made for her. Ben packed the set of small metal tools Joseph had crafted specially for his small hands. Charlie clutched a wooden horse that Joseph had carved for him during the long winter evenings. Can we take some of grandmother's corn cakes? Charlie asked, his voice small and sad. Joseph's grandmother, who had been unusually quiet all morning, smiled through her tears. Of course, little one. I will make you some to eat on your journey too. The missionary family who would care for the children until their departure to Pennsylvania arrived at 2 p.m. Reverend and Mrs. Patterson seemed like kind people, but they were strangers. Joseph could see the fear in the children's eyes as they looked at these new adults who would now control their lives. We will take good care of them, Mrs. Patterson assured Joseph. They will be comfortable in our home. Joseph nodded, not trusting his voice to remain steady. The hardest moment came when it was time to actually leave. All 3 children clung to Joseph and his grandmother, crying openly now. Charlie wrapped his arms around Joseph's neck and would not let go. I do not want to leave you, Uncle Joe, he sobbed. Please do not make me go. Joseph gently pried the little boy's arms loose, his own tears flowing freely now. I am not making you go, Charlie. Other people have decided this is what must happen, but remember what I told you. Love does not disappear just because people are apart. Lucy, trying to be brave as the oldest, wiped her eyes and stood straight. Will you write to us? Every week, Joseph promised, and you must write to me and tell me about everything you are learning and doing. Ben, who rarely showed emotion, threw his arms around Joseph's waist. I do not want to forget you. You will not forget us, Joseph's grandmother said, kneeling down to hug each child one more time. And we will never forget you. You are part of our family forever. As the Patterson family's wagon pulled away, Joseph and his grandmother stood, watching until it disappeared around the bend in the road. The silence that followed was the emptiest sound Joseph had ever heard. For the next 2 weeks, Joseph went through the motions of his daily life, but his heart was not in anything he did. The forge felt cold, even when the fire was blazing. The house seemed enormous and empty with just him and his grandmother. He visited the children at the Patterson house every few days, but the visits were awkward and painful. The children were polite and well-behaved, but Joseph could see they were unhappy. They had to sit properly at meals, speak only when spoken to, and spend hours each day studying Bible verses and practicing proper English pronunciation. Mrs. Patterson meant well, but she clearly believed that everything Apache or Mexican that the children had learned needed to be corrected. She discouraged them from using any Apache words, even among themselves. She made Lucy redo her hair in a style more appropriate for a young lady. She told Charlie that wooden horses were toys for babies, and he should focus on more educational activities. Joseph watched his bright, happy children becoming quiet and withdrawn, but he had no power to change anything. Finally, the day came for them to leave Cedar Ridge forever. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison had arranged for the children to travel by stagecoach to the railroad, then by train all the way to Pennsylvania. Joseph and his grandmother were allowed to say goodbye at the stagecoach station. The children looked neat and clean in their new Eastern clothes, but they looked like strangers. Lucy's wild blonde hair was tamed into a tight bun. Ben's clothes were so stiff and formal he could barely move naturally. Charlie kept tugging at his collar as if it were choking him. Remember everything I taught you about working with metal, Joseph told Ben quietly. Good craftsmanship is valuable anywhere in the world. Remember that being kind matters more than being proper, he told Lucy. Take care of your brothers. Remember that you are brave and smart and loved, he told Charlie, lifting the little boy up for one last hug. As the stagecoach pulled away, Joseph felt like his world was ending. The 3 children who had given his life meaning were gone, possibly forever. For months afterward, Joseph kept his promise to write weekly letters. He told them about his work, about changes in the town, about his grandmother's garden. The children wrote back, but their letters became shorter and less frequent as time passed. They wrote about their new school, their new friends, the wonderful opportunities they were experiencing. Joseph was happy that they were adjusting well, but each letter also felt like they were moving further away from the life they had shared. Then, one day in late summer, Joseph received a different kind of letter. It was from Lucy, and her handwriting looked rushed and emotional. Dear Uncle Joe, she wrote, Ben ran away yesterday. He took a train toward the west and left a note saying he was coming home to you. Uncle Robert and Aunt Helen are very upset. They have contacted the authorities to find him and bring him back. I wanted to warn you that he might be coming and that people will probably come looking for him. Charlie cries every night and keeps asking when we can go home. I keep telling everyone that Pennsylvania's nice, but it does not feel like home. Please write and tell me what to do. Your loving Lucy. Joseph read the letter 3 times, his heart pounding. Part of him was thrilled that Ben wanted to come back. But another part was terrified of what would happen when the boy arrived. 3 days later, Ben showed up at Joseph's door. He was thin, dirty, and exhausted from traveling, but his eyes were bright with determination. I came home, he announced simply, as if he had just been gone for the afternoon. Joseph pulled the boy into his arms and held him tight. Ben, what have you done? I came back where I belong. I do not care if they try to make me go back again. This is my home. Joseph's grandmother appeared and gasped when she saw Ben. Then she smiled, the biggest smile Joseph had seen from her in months. Welcome home, grandson, she said. But Joseph knew their troubles were just beginning. Within a week, Marshall Johnson, arrived from the territorial capital with papers authorizing him to return Ben to his legal guardians in Pennsylvania. Joseph knew he could not hide the boy or resist the law, but he also knew he could not bear to send Ben away again. That evening he sat down with his grandmother and Ben to discuss their options. "We could leave the territory," Joseph said quietly. "Go to California or Oregon, somewhere where they might not find us." "You would do that?" Ben asked, his eyes wide. "I would do anything to keep our family together." His grandmother nodded slowly. "It would mean leaving everything we have built here, starting over with nothing." "Some things are worth more than buildings and businesses," Joseph replied. 2 days before the marshal was scheduled to take Ben back east, Joseph made his decision. In the middle of the night, he, his grandmother, and Ben packed only what they could carry and slipped away from Cedar Ridge. They traveled west, staying off main roads, sleeping under the stars, living like the wandering Apache of old stories. Joseph's grandmother, despite her age, seemed to grow stronger during the journey, as if being back on the land renewed her spirit. After 2 months of careful travel, they reached California and settled in a small valley where Joseph's skills as a blacksmith were needed and welcome. He sent word to Lucy and Charlie through a trusted friend, letting them know where they were. 6 months later, Lucy and Charlie appeared at their new home. They had run away together, determined to find their family. The Morrisons, exhausted by the children's repeated escape attempts and constant unhappiness, had finally given up trying to force them to stay. Joseph's new family was together again, but at a great cost. They were exiles now, cut off from the life they had known. Joseph had lost his established business, his grandmother had left the land where she was born, and the children had given up any chance of the comfortable Eastern life they had been offered. But as Joseph watched Lucy teaching Charlie how to braid grass while Ben helped his grandmother tend their new garden, he knew they had made the right choice. Years later, when people asked Joseph if he regretted the sacrifices he had made, he would always give the same answer: "Love is not love if it comes without cost. The price we paid was high, but what we gained was worth everything we lost." The children grew up healthy and strong in their California valley. Lucy became a teacher who spoke 3 languages and never forgot the lesson that families are made by choice and love, not just by blood. Ben became a master craftsman who combined Apache metalworking techniques with modern methods to create beautiful and useful things. Charlie grew up to be a rancher who treated all people fairly, regardless of the color of their skin or the language they spoke. And Joseph's grandmother lived long enough to see them all married and raising children of their own. Children who grew up knowing that family means the people who choose to love you and stand by you, no matter what the world says about it. The forge that Joseph built in that California valley became a gathering place for people from many different backgrounds. Apache, Mexican,